My name is Henry Peach, and for 17 years, I believed I was married to a devoted woman. Vivian was a nurse, kind, calm, respected by everyone around her. She volunteered at the local parish on weekends, brought soup to sick neighbors, remembered birthdays, and always smiled like she carried no darkness inside her at all. I thought I knew her. Turns out I only knew the version she wanted me to see. Everything began with a suitcase. Vivian was packing for what she called a medical conference in Chicago. 3 days of professional seminars, continuing education credits, and networking with healthcare workers from across the country. The kind of thing a supportive husband was supposed to admire. I walked into the bedroom carrying a cup of coffee for her when I noticed something strange inside the open suitcase. A nun's habit, folded carefully beside her nursing uniform, and next to it, still sitting in a pharmacy bag, was a box of condoms. 12 of them. For about 30 seconds, my brain simply stopped functioning. I stood there staring at the suitcase, trying to force the pieces together into something that made sense. A nurse uniform, a nun costume, a 12-pack of condoms, and a medical conference. Either Vivian had developed some incredibly unusual professional interests, or my marriage was built on lies. I kept my voice calm. "Honey," I asked slowly, "what's with the Halloween costume?" Vivian stepped out of the bathroom with a toothbrush in her hand. For a split second, her face tightened, the exact expression of someone caught doing something they shouldn't. But she recovered quickly. "Oh, that?" she said with a light laugh. "The conference is doing a themed dinner, Saints and Sinners Night. You know how these medical events are. They try to make things fun." She answered with the same polished confidence she used when explaining treatment plans to patients. I glanced back at the suitcase. Saints and sinners? At a healthcare conference? "It's symbolic," she replied while brushing her teeth. "About moral boundaries in medicine, work-life balance, progressive stuff." The explanation sounded ridiculous. The smile on her face sounded rehearsed. Then I pointed toward the condoms. "And those?" She froze for half a heartbeat. In the bathroom mirror, I watched her eyes shift rapidly. Calculating, adjusting, building another lie in real time. "Free samples," she answered. "A pharmaceutical representative asked me to hand them out during the conference. Safe sex awareness is part of public health." I nodded slowly. 12 seems like a lot for a 3-day seminar. It's a big conference. That night, Vivian slept peacefully beside me, breathing softly like someone with absolutely nothing to hide. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of that suitcase over and over in my mind. 12 condoms. 3 days. Even the math felt dishonest. Unless the condoms weren't actually meant to prevent pregnancy, unless pregnancy was the goal. The next morning, Vivian kissed my cheek before leaving for the airport. "Call you tonight," she said sweetly. I smiled and watched her walk toward the parking garage. Then I followed her. From inside my truck, I watched my wife pull a small sewing needle from her purse. And for the next 5 minutes, she carefully punctured tiny holes into every condom inside that box. One by one. My chest went cold. I'm not a doctor, but even I know what happens when you destroy protection on purpose. Unless protection was never the point. Unless my wife of 17 years was trying to get pregnant by another man. I sat there long after she drove away, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers hurt. Around me, travelers loaded luggage into cars, hurried toward flights, laughed into phones. Meanwhile, my entire marriage had just cracked open in complete silence. When I finally went home, I didn't cry. I investigated. Vivian had made that part easy. We shared a family phone plan, and I handled all the bills. Her call records were only a few clicks away. The number she contacted most over the last 3 months didn't belong to the hospital, or her mother, or any coworker. It belonged to a man named Garrett Blackwood. He answered on the second ring. The sound of welding equipment roared in the background. "Yeah? Is this Garrett?" "Depends who's asking." "My name is Henry Peach," I said quietly. "I'm Vivian's husband." Silence, then a curse under his breath. I leaned back in my chair. "Congratulations, by the way." "What?" "You're going to be a father." Then I hung up. Because at that moment, I realized something terrifying. The woman I loved hadn't made one mistake. She had built an entire second life behind my back. For the next hour, I sat alone in the kitchen with Vivian's laptop open in front of me, the morning sunlight spilling across the counter like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had changed. The house felt unfamiliar now. Every framed photo on the wall looked fake. Every memory felt contaminated. 17 years of marriage suddenly seemed less like a love story and more like a carefully maintained illusion. Vivian had left her accounts logged in. Email, photo storage, private messages. No passwords hidden, no precautions taken. That was the strange part about people living double lives. Eventually, they stopped believing they could get caught. I opened the first email thread with Garrett Blackwood. And just like that, the truth spilled out in front of me. 5 months. That's how long the affair had been going on. 5 months of fake volunteer shifts, fake late-night hospital calls, fake church events. Garrett was a welding contractor, divorced, father of 3, living in a modest duplex on the west side of town. From the messages, it was obvious he believed Vivian was already separated from me. Vivian, meanwhile, believed Garrett was eventually going to leave everything behind for her. 2 liars building fantasies on top of each other. But the messages from the last 2 weeks were the ones that made my stomach twist. Vivian wasn't just cheating. She was planning carefully, methodically. She wrote about wanting a baby with Garrett, about forcing clarity, about making him realize they were meant to be together. She even joked about taking fate into her own hands. The needle, the condoms, it all fit together now. Garrett's replies were hesitant but not resistant. He admitted he'd always wanted another child someday. Vivian treated that sentence like permission. I stared at the screen for a long time after finishing the messages. Then I closed the laptop and started packing her things. Not some of them, all of them. Clothes disappeared from closets, makeup vanished from bathroom drawers, her nursing textbooks, porcelain cat collection, old journals, winter coats, shoes lined neatly by the door. Everything went into boxes and trash bags. I worked with calm, mechanical precision, like a man cleaning up after a flood. By noon, the house looked hollow. No trace of Vivian remained except the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the bedroom air. Loading everything into my pickup truck took 3 trips. Garrett lived in a neighborhood I'd driven through before but never really noticed. Small duplexes, gravel driveways, rusted trailers parked beside chain-link fences. Working-class survival dressed up as suburban life. His welding truck sat in the driveway like a steel monster built for war. I was stacking Vivian's boxes beside the front porch when the door opened. A brunette woman in cartoon print scrubs stepped outside. Tired eyes, strong posture. The kind of woman who looked like she carried entire households on her back without complaining. "Can I help you?" she asked carefully. "Are you Stephanie Blackwood?" A pause. "Ex-wife," she corrected. "And you must be Henry Peach." I nodded once. The understanding hit her immediately. Her eyes moved from me to the mountain of boxes piled beside the porch. "Oh," she whispered. "You're the husband." Past tense as of this morning. She stared at the luggage for several seconds. "Is that all her stuff?" "Everything that mattered." Stephanie let out a dry laugh that sounded closer to exhaustion than amusement. "Garrett called an hour ago," she said. "Said he needed to talk to me about Vivian. Mentioned something about her staying here for a while." I folded my arms. You should probably know she's trying to get pregnant. Stephanie blinked. What? She punctured condoms before leaving this morning. The color drained from her face. You're serious. I watched her do it. Stephanie slowly sat down on the front steps like her knees had stopped working. Jesus Christ. He thinks she's separated, I continued. She thinks he's leaving his old life for her. Neither of them knows the full story. Stephanie rubbed both hands over her face. He told me she was already divorced. Yesterday morning I thought I was happily married, I replied quietly. Turns out we were all getting lied to. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Two strangers connected by the wreckage other people created. Finally, Stephanie looked up at me. So what happens now? I glanced at the boxes piled around us. Now Vivian gets to explain why she's homeless, potentially pregnant, and standing in front of her boyfriend's ex-wife. And Garrett? He gets to learn that lying women usually don't stop at one lie. Stephanie laughed once, bitter and sharp. You sound calm for a man whose marriage just exploded. I work in forensic accounting, I said. People lie to me for a living. I'm just finally realizing my wife was one of them. A breeze swept through the yard, rattling the cardboard flaps beside us. Stephanie looked down at one of the labels written in black marker. Vivian Peach. She shook her head slowly. That name sounds so normal written down like that. She can keep it, I replied. I'm done with it. Before leaving, I handed Stephanie my number. If Vivian shows up asking where I am, I said, tell her the truth. And what truth is that? I looked back at the boxes one last time. That devoted husbands don't stay devoted to women who try to get pregnant by other men. I drove home, expecting to feel rage. Instead, I felt empty. The kind of emptiness that settles into your chest after something dies quietly inside you. The house was silent when I walked in. No television humming in the background. No smell of Vivian's vanilla candles. No shoes kicked carelessly beside the staircase. Just silence. For 17 years, I had built my entire life around another person's presence. And now, in a single afternoon, it felt like she had been erased from existence. I opened a beer and sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her laptop had been that morning. That was when the first call came. 7:23 p.m., Vivian's name lit up my phone screen. I answered calmly. Hi, sweetheart, she said cheerfully. How was your day? Her voice sounded warm, relaxed, completely unaware that her entire life had collapsed while she was away pretending to attend seminars. Educational, I replied. Very enlightening. She laughed softly. How's the conference? I asked. Oh, you know, lectures all day, networking events. Everyone pretending to be awake after drinking hotel coffee. She giggled. The hotel is beautiful, though. Amazing view of the lake. I leaned back in my chair. Sounds busy. Very busy, she said quickly. Back-to-back sessions. Extremely hands-on. The irony in her voice made my stomach turn. What about you? She asked. What did you do today? I took a slow sip of beer. Cleaned the house, did some organizing, made a few phone calls. That sounds productive. It was. There was a pause. Then she smiled through the phone again. I should go soon. We have the themed dinner tonight. Saints and sinners? Exactly, she laughed. You remembered. Oh, I remembered. Well, love you, Henry. I closed my eyes for a second. And despite everything, despite the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, a part of me still loved the woman I thought she used to be. Love you too, Vivian, I answered quietly. The second call came 4 hours later, 11:47 p.m. This time her voice sounded different, tense, breathless, afraid. Henry, Hey, Vivian. I just got off the phone with Garrett. I figured you might. A long silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "How did you know? About the affair? Or about the pregnancy plan?" Another silence. I could practically hear her mind scrambling for excuses. "Henry, I can explain. You punctured condoms in an airport parking garage this morning," I interrupted calmly. "That's a difficult visual to explain away." "You followed me?" "I was bringing my wife coffee. Turns out I discovered a criminal conspiracy instead." "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think." Her breathing grew shaky. "You talked to Garrett?" "And Stephanie." The silence that followed felt like a power outage. "You told his ex-wife?" "I delivered your belongings personally. Thought it was polite." "My belongings?" she repeated weakly. "Everything you owned is sitting on Garrett's porch right now." "What?" "You heard me." "Henry, you can't do that." "I already did." "That's my home." "No," I said coldly. "It was your home. Past tense." Her composure finally cracked. "Please don't do this." "Do what? React to my wife trying to get pregnant by another man?" "I was confused." "No, Vivian. Confused people buy sports cars or get bad haircuts. They don't sabotage birth control and build second families." She started crying softly. Real crying. Not the controlled tears she used during arguments. These sounded raw, panicked, ugly. "I never meant for this to happen." I laughed quietly. "You packed a nun costume, 12 condoms, and a pregnancy plan. This didn't accidentally happen." "I didn't know what I wanted." "You knew exactly what you wanted," I snapped for the first time. "You wanted me for security and Garrett for excitement. You wanted both lives at the same time." "That's not true." "Then what was the plan, Vivian?" I asked. "Get pregnant and tell me it was mine? Raise Garrett's kid in my house? Keep lying until the baby came out looking like a welder instead of an accountant?" She said nothing, because silence sometimes tells the truth better than words ever can. Finally, she whispered, "Please let me come home." I stared into the darkness of the empty kitchen. The kitchen where we used to dance while making dinner. The kitchen where she used to kiss me before early shifts at the hospital. The kitchen where I once believed every word she said. "There is no home anymore," I answered quietly. "Henry, you made your choice the moment you picked up that needle." Then I hung up. And for the first time since this nightmare began, the silence in the house no longer felt lonely. It felt honest. The third call came at 2:43 in the morning. I almost didn't answer. Almost. But something inside me needed to hear what remained of the woman I had spent 17 years loving. When I picked up, all I heard at first was wind, then Vivian's shaky voice. "Henry, I'm at Garrett's house." I sat up slowly in bed. "How's that working out for you?" "She won't let me inside." "Stephanie?" "Yes." I rubbed a hand across my face and looked at the dark ceiling above me. "She says Garrett isn't here," Vivian continued, trying and failing to steady her breathing. "But his truck is in the driveway. Maybe he's hiding." "This isn't funny." "No," I agreed quietly. "It really isn't." In the background, I could hear rain beginning to fall. Soft at first, then heavier. "My boxes are still outside," she whispered. "Everything's getting wet." I closed my eyes. For one dangerous second, pity crept into my chest. Then I remembered the needle, the lies, the months of deception, and the pity disappeared. "You should probably move them somewhere dry." "I don't have anywhere to move them." Her voice cracked completely now. "I don't have anywhere to go, Henry." The words hung in the silence between us. 17 years together, and this was what remained. A crying woman sitting in the rain beside the ruins of her own choices. You could try a hotel, I said finally, preferably one hosting a medical conference. Don't be cruel. Don't cheat on your husband. A sharp inhale, then sobbing. Not graceful crying, not manipulative tears. This sounded like someone realizing too late that fantasies collapse when they collide with reality. I made a mistake, she cried. You made hundreds. I didn't mean to hurt you. That doesn't really matter anymore. Please, she whispered. Please just let me come home. We can fix this. I sat in silence for several seconds before answering. No, Vivian, we can't. Why not? Because trust dies quietly. That was the answer. Not in screaming matches, not in dramatic betrayals. Trust dies in tiny moments. Fake conferences, hidden phone calls, lies told with relaxed smiles, needles piercing condoms while your husband watches from 50 feet away, wondering who you've become. You spent 5 months destroying this marriage, I said softly. You don't get to rebuild it in one night because your backup plan failed. It wasn't a backup plan. Then what was Garrett? She said nothing. Rain hammered harder against the phone. I imagined her sitting there on Stephanie's porch, mascara running down her face, surrounded by damp cardboard boxes containing the remains of her old life. I just wanted to feel alive again, she whispered eventually. The honesty in her voice almost hurt more than the lies. I leaned back against the headboard. Vivian, do you know what the worst part is? What? I would have listened. She stopped crying for a moment. If you had told me you felt invisible, if you told me you were unhappy, if you needed something from me, my throat tightened slightly. I would have tried. I know. No, I said bitterly. You know now. That's different. The rain continued pouring. Cars hissed past somewhere nearby. A dog barked in the distance. Ordinary sounds from an ordinary night, while 2 lives completely fell apart. I never stopped loving you, she whispered. I stared into the darkness. That's what makes this so disgusting. Henry, you loved me while lying to my face every day. You loved me while sleeping with another man. You loved me while trying to carry his child. I didn't think things would go this far. I laughed once, tired and hollow. People always say that after they burn their lives down. She started crying again. I'm scared. For the first time that night, my anger faded completely. Because I believed her. She was scared. Not of losing Garrett. Not even of losing me. She was scared because the fantasy was gone now. No more secret hotel rooms. No more exciting double life. No more illusion of control. Just consequences, raw and unavoidable. Henry, what if I'm pregnant? The question sat heavily between us. I answered without emotion. Then Garrett's going to be a father. What if he doesn't want it? You should have thought about that before trying to trap him. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. Fair would have been honesty. She broke down completely then. The sound of her crying filled the phone while I sat motionless in the dark bedroom that used to belong to both of us. Finally, after several minutes, she whispered, I don't know who I became. That sentence stayed with me, because neither did I. The woman I married would never have done this. The woman I married wouldn't have lied so easily, wouldn't have manipulated people, wouldn't have gambled an entire marriage for excitement and validation. Somewhere along the way, Vivian had turned into a stranger wearing my wife's face. And maybe the most painful part was realizing I had no idea when it happened. "I'm turning my phone off now," I told her quietly. "Henry, wait. You wanted another life, Vivian." My voice sounded exhausted even to myself. "Now you have one." Then I ended the call. And this time, I didn't feel angry, just tired. Like a man mourning someone who was still alive. The next morning, I drove past Garrett's duplex on my way to work. I told myself it was curiosity, nothing more. But deep down, I think I needed proof that everything had truly happened, that the nightmare was real, and not something my exhausted mind had invented during a sleepless night. Vivian's Prius was still parked at the curb. Rainwater streaked the windows. Most of the cardboard boxes had been dragged beneath the small porch roof, though several garbage bags had split open during the storm. Clothes spilled across the wet concrete like pieces of a dismantled life, and there she was. Vivian sat alone on the front steps, wrapped in a gray blanket, knees pulled against her chest. Her hair was damp and tangled. Her makeup had long since disappeared. She looked nothing like the polished, composed nurse who had kissed me goodbye at the airport barely 24 hours earlier. She looked lost. For one dangerous moment, my foot eased toward the brake pedal. Then she lifted her head, and I remembered the needle. I kept driving. At lunchtime, I called Stephanie. She answered on the second ring, sounding exhausted. "How's the situation over there?" I asked. A long sigh. "Complicated." "That sounds promising." Garrett came home around 1 in the morning completely drunk. Vivian confronted him on the lawn. Half the neighborhood probably heard the fight. I leaned back in my office chair. And apparently Garrett doesn't want anything to do with her anymore. That surprised me less than it should have. "He says she lied about being separated," Stephanie continued. "Lied about the birth control, lied about everything. According to him, he never agreed to any baby plan." I rubbed my temple slowly. Funny how liars always get offended when someone lies to them. Stephanie gave a tired laugh. "She's still sitting outside, Henry. She'll figure something out." "You really don't care anymore, do you?" The question lingered in the air longer than I expected. Did I care? Yes, that was the problem. I still cared enough for it to hurt. But caring and forgiving are not the same thing. "I care," I admitted quietly. "I just don't trust her." Stephanie went silent. Then softly, "Those are two very different things." After work, I stayed late finishing reports I didn't actually need to finish. The truth was, I didn't want to go home yet. The house still carried echoes of Vivian, a coffee mug she forgot to pack, a loose strand of her hair caught in the bathroom drawer, ghosts hidden inside ordinary objects. By the time I finally left the office, the sun had already disappeared behind dark clouds. And that's when I saw her. Vivian was sitting inside her Prius in the parking lot across from my building, waiting. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she slowly stepped out of the car. She looked terrible. Not dramatic movie terrible, real terrible. Eyes swollen from crying, hair pulled into a messy knot, wrinkled clothes she'd clearly slept in, exhaustion hanging from her shoulders like physical weight. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I unlocked the office door without answering and walked inside. She followed me upstairs in silence. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above us as she sat across from my desk. The same chair clients used when confessing financial fraud they hoped I could somehow clean up. Fitting, really. Vivian folded her trembling hands together. "I made a mistake." I stared at her for several seconds. "Which one?" Tears welled instantly in her eyes. "All of it." "The affair?" "Yes." "The lies?" "Yes." "The pregnancy plan?" She lowered her head. "Yes." I leaned back slowly in my chair. For years, I had imagined this exact moment in other marriages. The cheating spouse breaking down, the devastated partner demanding answers, the dramatic confrontation. But now that it was happening to me, all I felt was sadness. Not rage, not satisfaction, just grief. I don't understand, I admitted quietly. 17 years, Vivian. We had problems like everybody else, but I thought we were happy. We were, she whispered. Then why? She wiped at her face helplessly. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like myself. I said nothing. I became your wife, she continued shakily. Then the dependable nurse. Then the woman everyone counted on. Every day felt exactly the same. Wake up, work, come home, sleep, repeat. And Garrett changed that? He made me feel noticed. The honesty in her voice hurt more than another lie would have. He listened to me, she whispered. He looked at me like I mattered. You mattered to me. I know. No, I snapped quietly. You know that now. Vivian broke again, tears slipping silently down her face. I was selfish, she admitted. I wanted excitement without losing security. I thought I could control everything. I let out a humorless laugh. Control? My voice hardened for the first time. You sabotaged condoms, Vivian. That's not confusion, that's manipulation. She flinched. I know. You were willing to let me raise another man's child. I wasn't thinking clearly. Stop saying that. The sharpness in my voice startled both of us. I leaned forward across the desk. You thought very clearly. Every lie was calculated, every excuse prepared in advance. You planned this. She looked down at the floor, and that silence was the closest thing to a confession I was ever going to get. Finally, I opened my desk drawer and slid a thick manila envelope across the table. Vivian stared at it, then at me. Henry. Divorce papers. Her breathing caught. You already filed? This morning. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. Please don't do this. You already did. We can fix this, she whispered desperately. Counseling, therapy, anything. No. The word came out calm, final. Because somewhere between the suitcase and the needle, something inside me had broken permanently. And we both knew it. Vivian stared at the divorce papers like they were written in another language. Her fingers trembled as she touched the edge of the envelope, but she didn't open it. Henry, please, she whispered, don't throw away 17 years over one mistake. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable how people reduced destruction into harmless little words once consequences arrived. One mistake. As if affairs lasted 5 accidental months. As if lies told every day were somehow isolated incidents. As if puncturing condoms was a momentary lapse in judgment instead of a deliberate act. I folded my hands together on the desk. You didn't make one mistake, Vivian, I said quietly. You built an entirely separate life. Fresh tears slid down her cheeks. I know I hurt you. Hurt me? I repeated softly. You looked me in the eyes every day and lied without hesitation. Do you understand what that does to a person? She lowered her head. I hated myself afterward. No, I replied. You hated getting caught. That one landed. I saw it in the way her shoulders stiffened, in the way her mouth opened slightly but no words came out. Because deep down, she knew I was right. People rarely regret betrayal while they're enjoying it. They regret the collapse afterward. I loved you, she whispered. The sadness in her voice felt genuine, and somehow that made everything worse. I believe you did, I admitted. but not enough. Silence settled heavily between us. Outside the office windows, rain tapped softly against the glass while headlights slid across the wet streets below. Vivian looked exhausted now, not just physically, spiritually, like someone who had finally reached the end of a fantasy and discovered nothing waiting there. "Garrett doesn't want me," she said suddenly. I stared at her. Was that supposed to make me feel better? No. Then why tell me? Because I think I finally understand what I destroyed. For the first time all night, I saw something real in her expression. Not manipulation, not panic, just grief. "He told me I ruined his life," she whispered. "Stephanie hates me. My coworkers know something happened. I can't go home. I can't even look at myself right now." I leaned back slowly in my chair. "And whose fault is that?" She nodded weakly. "Mine." Another silence. Then, quietly, "I never thought you'd actually leave me." That sentence hit harder than she realized, because buried underneath it was the ugliest truth of all. She never believed I'd choose myself over her. Never believed I had limits. Never believed I'd walk away no matter what she did. Maybe I'd spent too many years being dependable, predictable, forgiving. "I loved you more than anyone in my life," I said carefully. "But love without respect turns poisonous." Vivian covered her face and cried openly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, broken sobs leaking through her fingers. And sitting there across from her, I finally understood something important. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at the consequences of unchecked selfishness. At someone who kept reaching for excitement until she destroyed every stable thing she had. After several minutes, she wiped her face and looked up at me again. "What happens now?" I exhaled slowly. "Now you sign the papers." "And then?" "Then you figure out who you are without lying to people." "That's cruel." "No," I said softly. "Cruel was trying to trap another man with a pregnancy while staying married to me." She closed her eyes. "I deserve that." "Yes," I answered honestly. "You do." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Vivian finally picked up the envelope. But before opening it, she looked at me one last time. "Did you ever really love me?" The question almost broke me, because despite everything, despite the lies, despite the humiliation, despite the destruction she caused, the answer was still yes. "With everything I had," I said quietly. Vivian's face crumpled completely. "Then why does it feel like you hate me now?" I looked at the woman across from me, the woman I once imagined growing old beside, and I realized hatred wasn't what I felt at all. Hatred requires passion, emotion, energy. What I felt now was emptiness, like standing in the ashes after a fire has already burned itself out. "I don't hate you, Vivian." "Then what?" I held her gaze for several long seconds. "I just don't recognize you anymore." That finally destroyed whatever hope she still had left. She broke down crying again, shoulders shaking violently now, while I sat motionless behind the desk, feeling my marriage quietly die in front of me. And the worst part? A small piece of me still wanted to stand up, walk around the desk, and hold her. But love is dangerous when it survives after trust is gone. So I stayed where I was, and let the distance between us become permanent. 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Clean, fast, almost painfully simple for something that had once defined my entire adult life. The judge signed the papers in less than 10 minutes. 17 years reduced to a stack of documents and a few legal signatures. Funny how quickly the law can erase what the heart spent decades building. By then, the house finally felt different. Not happier, just quieter, healthier. I had repainted the bedroom walls, replaced the old wedding photos with framed pictures of places I wanted to visit someday, and donated half the furniture Vivian had picked out. Little by little, the house stopped feeling like a crime scene. It started feeling like mine again. Stephanie and I occasionally had coffee together at a diner downtown. Not because we were romantically involved, we weren't, but because surviving the same disaster creates a strange kind of understanding between people. One rainy afternoon, she stirred cream into her coffee and asked softly, "Do you ever miss her?" I looked out the diner window at the wet streets glimmering beneath traffic lights. "Every day," I admitted. Stephanie nodded like she'd expected that answer. "But I miss who I thought she was," I continued, "not who she became." "That's fair." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The waitress refilled our cups while old country music played softly from speakers near the kitchen. Ordinary life continuing forward. That was the strange thing about betrayal. You expect the world to stop afterward, but it doesn't. People still go to work, coffee still gets poured, traffic still moves, and somehow you keep breathing through all of it. "Any idea where Vivian is now?" Stephanie asked carefully. "Seattle." "She actually moved?" I nodded. One of our mutual friends said she got a nursing job there. "And Garrett?" I gave a small shrug. Still welding, still avoiding complicated women. Stephanie laughed under her breath. "Smart man." I almost smiled. After coffee, I drove home beneath gray skies and spent the evening assembling a bookshelf in the living room. Something Vivian always said was unnecessary because nobody reads physical books anymore. Turns out silence leaves room for old hobbies. Around 9 o'clock, my phone rang. Stephanie. The moment I answered, I knew something was wrong. "Henry." Her voice sounded uneasy. "What happened?" A pause. Then, "Vivian's back in town." I leaned slowly against the kitchen counter. "Okay?" "She's pregnant." The words landed heavily in the room. "How pregnant?" "Very." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course she was. Somehow the news didn't even surprise me anymore. "What about Garrett?" "He says it's not his." I let out a short, hollow laugh. "That tracks." "Apparently the timeline doesn't work," Stephanie continued carefully. "He thinks she was seeing someone else, too." For a few seconds I said nothing at all. Then I laughed again. Not because it was funny. Because at some point, the entire situation had become too absurd for anger. Vivian hadn't just burned down her marriage. She'd burned down every relationship around her. "What does she want?" I asked finally. Stephanie hesitated. "She asked if I thought you might take her back." I stared at the dark kitchen window reflecting my own face back at me. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass. Inside, the silence felt endless. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her some lessons come too late." I nodded slowly. "Good answer." "She's staying at the motel on Highway 9, room 247. You think I should go see her?" "No," Stephanie said honestly. "I think you deserve peace. But I thought you should know." After hanging up, I stood there for a long time without moving. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave the past buried where it belonged. But another part, the part that once loved Vivian more than anything, needed closure. So later that night, I drove to Highway 9. The motel looked exactly how sadness feels. Flickering neon sign, cracked pavement, thin curtains glowing blue from old television screens. Vivian's Prius sat outside room 247 looking worn out and exhausted, just like its owner probably did. I parked across the street and stared at the room for nearly 10 minutes. I imagined her inside, pregnant, alone, probably terrified. And for one brief moment, I thought about walking to that door, thought about knocking softly, thought about offering help. Not because she deserved it, but because once upon a time, I promised to love her for better or worse. Then I remembered the suitcase, the lies, the needle, the months of deception, and finally, the most important truth of all. Love cannot survive where trust is buried. I never got out of the truck. Instead, I drove home to my quiet house, my honest life, my peaceful silence. It wasn't the future I imagined when I married Vivian at 27 years old, but it was real. And after everything she had done, real was enough. 3 days later, Stephanie called again. I was sitting in my office reviewing financial reports when her name appeared on my screen. The moment I answered, her voice came softly through the speaker. Vivian had the baby. I closed my eyes briefly. A boy or a girl? A little girl, healthy. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Somewhere across town, a child had entered the world carrying none of the guilt, lies, or destruction that surrounded her existence. Children never ask to be born inside chaos. What about the father? I asked finally. Stephanie sighed. That's complicated. Meaning? Garrett still says the baby isn't his. Apparently Vivian was seeing someone else in Seattle too. I leaned back slowly in my chair and stared at the ceiling tiles above me. At this point, nothing shocked me anymore. The lies had simply grown larger than the people telling them. There's more, Stephanie added carefully. I already knew I wasn't going to like the next sentence. What? She listed you as the father on the birth certificate. I laughed once, a quiet, exhausted sound. Of course she did. Even now, even after everything, still trying to tie me to the consequences of her choices. My lawyer will handle it, I said calmly. You should probably request a paternity test. I don't need one. You sound very sure. I know exactly when Vivian and I last slept together, I replied. And it wasn't 9 months ago. Stephanie fell silent for a moment. Then softly, You really are done with her. I turned toward the office window. Outside, people crossed the street carrying coffees and briefcases, living ordinary lives untouched by betrayal and disaster. I think I've been done for a long time, I admitted quietly. It just took me a while to accept it. After the call ended, I sat alone in my office thinking about Vivian. Not the woman from the motel, not the crying stranger who begged for forgiveness in my office. The old Vivian, the woman I married. The woman who used to fall asleep on the couch halfway through movies. The woman who danced barefoot in the kitchen while making pasta. The woman who once looked at me like I was enough. That woman felt dead now. Not physically, but spiritually, emotionally. Somewhere between the lies and the manipulation and the endless selfish choices, she had disappeared. And the hardest part of all this wasn't losing my marriage. It was realizing I had already lost her long before I discovered the truth. That evening, I drove home beneath a sky painted orange by the setting sun. The house greeted me with silence, but no longer the painful silence of abandonment. This silence felt peaceful, earned. I made dinner for myself, opened a book, and sat beside the living room window while rain tapped softly against the glass. Simple things. Honest things. For months, I had kept asking myself the same question. Could I have forgiven her? Could I have shown more grace, more patience, more understanding? Maybe. But forgiveness only works when truth arrives before destruction. Vivian never confessed. She never stopped on her own. I found the lies myself. I uncovered the affair myself. I watched her puncture those condoms with my own eyes. And some betrayals cross lines that love cannot repair. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. For several seconds, there was only breathing. Then Vivian's voice, small, weak. She's beautiful. I leaned back slowly in my chair. I'm glad the baby's healthy. Another silence. Then, I named her Grace. The irony nearly broke me. Not because the name was bad, but because Grace was the one thing neither of us had truly found through any of this. She deserves better than all this, I said quietly. I know. Vivian sounded exhausted, like someone who had spent too long fighting reality and finally lost. Henry, she whispered, I never meant to become this person. I looked out at the rain sliding down the window beside me. Neither had I. None of us wake up expecting our lives to collapse into strangers and court papers and motel rooms. But choices build people. Little by little, lie by lie. And eventually, those choices reveal who we really are. I think you did, I said softly. Her breathing caught. What? I think this person was always inside you somewhere. The lies just gave her permission to exist. Vivian started crying quietly on the other end of the line. Not loudly, not dramatically, just the tired tears of someone mourning the ruins of their own life. I loved you, she whispered again, and this time, for the first time in months, I finally understood the truth. She probably did. In her own broken, selfish way, she did love me. But love without loyalty becomes poison. Love without honesty becomes manipulation. And love without integrity eventually destroys everything around it. I know, I answered gently. That seemed to hurt her more than anger ever could. After a long silence, she finally asked the question both of us had been avoiding since this nightmare began. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought about it carefully, then answered honestly. Maybe someday. Hope flickered briefly in her voice. Really? But forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. The hope disappeared immediately. I see. No, Vivian, I said quietly. I think you finally do. She cried softly again, and for the first time since discovering the affair, I didn't feel rage listening to her cry. I just felt distant, like hearing the sadness of someone I used to know very well. Eventually, she whispered goodbye. I said goodbye back. Then the line went dead. And strangely, that felt like the real ending. Not the divorce papers, not the motel, not the affair. This. Two strangers saying goodbye to a marriage that had already died long before either of them admitted it. I set my phone down and sat quietly in the dim light of the living room. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, my house felt warm and calm and honest. For the first time in a very long time, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore, and that meant I was finally free.